I always thought betrayal would come loud, shouting, slam doors, maybe even a confession. But mine came quietly, in the dead of night, wrapped in a whisper I wasn't meant to hear. I woke to cold sheets and an empty bed. Then, his voice, calm, reassuring, not for me. Just a little longer. She doesn't suspect anything yet. That sentence shattered everything. In that moment, I wasn't a wife. I was a target. And the man I built my life with was already planning how to take it all away. The silence in the house was deeper than usual, the kind that made every creak of the floorboard sound like a warning. Karina Holt blinked into the darkness, her eyes adjusting just in time to notice the empty space beside her. Wesley's side of the bed was cold. For a moment she assumed he'd gone to the bathroom or slipped downstairs for water, but as she sat up, tugging the sheets around her shoulders, she heard it. A voice, his voice, low, careful, coated in a softness he never used with clients or colleagues. The hallway light was off, but the silver hue of the moon slipped through the plantation shutters, casting sharp shadows on the hardwood. She slipped from bed barefoot, drawn by instinct more than suspicion, pausing just outside the home office door. Just a little longer. She doesn't suspect anything yet. Her breath caught. The voice on the other end was inaudible, but Wesley's reply was crystal clear. Her chest tightened as a cold awareness settled deep in her bones. He was hiding something. Something big. Before she could gather her thoughts, his footsteps grew louder, moving back toward the bedroom. Karina darted silently to the bed, slid under the covers, and slowed her breathing to mimic sleep. Moments later she felt the mattress dip, his weight easing beside her like nothing had happened. He exhaled deeply, relaxed, as if the lie hadn't just rolled off his tongue moments ago. She turned to face him slowly, her voice groggy. "Where were you?" "Bathroom," he murmured without hesitation. "Lie." "And the phone call?" "Client issue, just smoothing things out." Another lie. But his tone was steady, his eyes unreadable. She stared at him in the dim light, her mind racing. Maybe she was overthinking, maybe not, but one thing was certain. Those weren't the words of a man who had nothing to hide. She turned away, blinking at the shadows on the ceiling, heart pounding, the whisper looping in her head like a curse. She doesn't suspect anything yet. But now she did, and he had no idea. The next morning, Karina moved through her routine like a woman balancing on the edge of a blade, smiling where expected, speaking softly, but watching everything. Wesley sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone, humming like he hadn't whispered betrayal the night before. When he kissed her cheek and said, "We should really get our finances in order, just in case of emergencies," her blood ran cold. Wesley had never cared about their finances beyond the mortgage and taxes. They kept separate accounts by a mutual agreement. So why now? Why this sudden interest in what she owned? When he left to meet a client, Karina opened her laptop with trembling hands. She logged into their joint accounts, then hers. At first, everything seemed normal, until she looked closer, withdrawals ranging from $300 to $2,800, each spaced just far enough apart to avoid suspicion, but all within the past 4 months. She didn't recognize a single one. Her breath caught. These weren't payments for bills or project expenses. They were siphons, strategically timed and carefully hidden. That evening he handed her a stack of papers with a smile too polished to trust. "Legal precaution," he said. "Just consolidating assets under one name. Safer that way." Her name wasn't on the documents except where she was meant to sign. Property transfers, account access, her studio, their rental home, all of it, to him. Her hands didn't tremble. She simply placed the papers on the counter and smiled. "I'll think about it." Wesley nodded, satisfied, already convinced she was folding, but he had underestimated the woman across from him. She wasn't panicking. She was planning, and the next time he tried to trap her with legalese and charm, she'd be 10 steps ahead. The moment came unexpectedly, like fate tilting the board in Karina's favor. Wesley had always been meticulous. His phone never left his side, always face down, always locked. But that evening, as they lounged in the living room with takeout and fake laughter, he got up to take a shower and, for the first time in weeks, left his phone unattended on the coffee table. Karina stared at it, her pulse quickening. She hesitated for only a second before leaning forward, the screen still face down. Then, buzz. A message illuminated the glass. One name, Lena Groves. Her heart nearly stopped. The preview read, "Just make sure she stays in the dark." Almost there. The words felt like ice sliding down her spine. Her instincts had been right all along. She didn't dare unlock it. Instead, she memorized the name, gently tilted the phone back, and returned to her seat, heart hammering like a drum. She curled into herself on the couch, pretending to scroll through her own device. Minutes later, Wesley emerged, towel around his shoulders, a satisfied calm on his face. He grabbed the phone without a glance and sat beside her. "You decide on dinner yet?" he asked, voice light. Karina shook her head, managing a casual shrug. Still thinking. Inside, a storm had already begun. Whoever Lena was, she wasn't just a friend. And Wesley wasn't just hiding money. He was staging a controlled exit, complete with an accomplice. That night, Karina barely slept. She didn't cry, she calculated. He thought he was almost there. But that message had flipped the entire game. Karina now knew the enemy, the plan, and most importantly, that she was running out of time. But what Wesley didn't know, so was he. By the next morning, the performance was in full swing. Wesley brewed coffee, cracked jokes, and acted like a man with nothing to hide. Karina played along, watching him closely, noting every deflection, every effort to control the narrative. Then, over breakfast, he delivered the final push. "I've been thinking," he said, casual as ever. "We should probably separate. It's been coming for a while, hasn't it?" His words were rehearsed, precise, polished, practiced. Karina didn't flinch. She stared at him, letting the silence stretch just long enough for discomfort to set in. Then she set down her mug with surgical precision. "So you've been planning this," she said, more observation than question. Wesley blinked, caught, but just briefly. "It's for the best," he replied smoothly. "We've grown apart." Karina tilted her head, like she was studying an insect behind glass. "No," she said softly. "You wanted out, but you wanted to make sure you didn't leave empty-handed." His jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. She smiled then, not with kindness but with calculation. "You should know, Wesley. I already moved everything. My assets, my studio, the condo. It's protected, legally." The words hit him like a slow, suffocating wave. His composure fractured for a split second. Just long enough for her to see it. Then came the mask. A forced smile, a shrug, a hollow chuckle. "You'll regret this, Karina," he muttered, voice low and clipped. She leaned back, completely calm. "That's what you said when I started my business without you, and yet here we are." For the first time, he looked small to her. Not dangerous, just a man who thought he was clever, until the trap he built snapped shut on his own hand. And this time, she was the one holding the blueprint. The next morning, Karina answered the knock at her door with a quiet breath and a steel spine. A man in a navy blazer stood on the porch, an envelope in hand and a clipboard in the other. "Karina Holt?" She nodded. "You've been served." She didn't flinch as she took the papers. The weight of them was more insult than surprise. She knew what was inside even before she opened them. Petition for dissolution of marriage. But it wasn't just divorce. Wesley wanted everything. Half of her business, her studio, their properties, and, most laughably, monthly spousal support. He truly believed he could rewrite the story and walk away the victim. Karina brought the document straight to Patricia, her attorney. The older woman skimmed the pages with a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. "He has no claim," she said simply. You moved your assets into the trust before he filed. Legally, it's locked. A breath Karina didn't realize she'd been holding slipped from her chest. Relief, but it was short-lived. That evening, just after sunset, the door to her townhouse slammed open. Wesley. Eyes bloodshot, shirt rumpled, fury rolling off him in waves. You think you're clever, he spat. You're playing dirty. Karina didn't rise from the couch. She swirled her wine and took a slow sip before replying. No, Wesley, you tried to play dirty. I just learned to play better. His face darkened. You planned this. She met his gaze, steady. So did you. The silence that followed crackled with electricity. But Karina didn't budge. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cower. She had survived the ambush, blocked the first blow, and now the real war was beginning. And this time, she was choosing the battlefield. By the end of that week, the war left the courtroom and crept into the streets. And worse, into Karina's office. It began with sidelong glances during meetings, whispers that died the second she entered the room. Clients postponed calls. A city council official she'd worked with for years suddenly needed to reassess partnerships. Then Rachel, her assistant, stepped into her office looking pale and hesitant. I didn't want to bring this to you, but there's a rumor going around. Karina set her pen down. What kind of rumor? Rachel swallowed. That you siphoned money from the joint accounts, that you've been laundering funds through your business. The words hung in the air like poison. Karina felt the heat rise under her skin, but she stayed composed. And who exactly is saying this? Wesley, Rachel said softly. He's been talking to people. Friends, clients, even some city contacts. Of course he was. Karina opened her laptop, pulled transaction records, screenshots of text messages, anything she could gather that told the real story. She printed everything, tucked them into a folder, and headed straight to Patricia's office. He's not just trying to take my money anymore, Karina said, voice sharp, hand shaking slightly as she dropped the folder onto the desk. He's trying to destroy my name. Patricia flipped through the papers with a dry chuckle. He's desperate. That's good for us. Karina arched a brow. Good? Because when desperate people lie, they leave evidence, and we're going to use every bit of it. Karina nodded, the fire in her chest burning hotter than ever. Wesley thought humiliation would break her. What he didn't realize was, every whisper, every lie, was just more fuel for her fight, and she wasn't planning to stay quiet anymore. The courtroom was colder than Karina expected, not in temperature, but in tension. Wesley sat across from her in a tailored navy suit, jaw tight, posture composed, the very picture of the wronged husband. His lawyer stood with false confidence and delivered the opening blow. Your Honor, my client respectfully requests a full forensic audit of Miss Holt's financial activity for the past 6 months. We believe significant assets were concealed in an attempt to avoid equitable distribution. Karina didn't blink. She didn't need to. Patricia stood calmly, adjusted her glasses, and stepped forward with a thick binder in hand. Your Honor, she said clearly, all financial transfers in question were made before Mr. Holt filed for divorce. The assets in question were legally and independently secured through a trust, with no evidence of mismanagement or concealment. This motion is baseless and frankly a stall tactic. She placed the binder down with a soft thud. We request not only a dismissal, but also that Mr. Holt be held responsible for my client's legal fees incurred due to this meritless motion. The judge leafed through the binder slowly, silence stretching heavy in the room. Wesley leaned forward, trying to appear composed, but Karina saw the tightness in his jaw, the slight twitch in his left hand. He was unraveling beneath the surface. Finally, the judge looked up. Motion denied. No audit will be conducted. Mr. Holt will be responsible for all legal costs associated with this filing. The gavel came down with finality. Wesley walked past her outside the courtroom without making eye contact. But just before he reached the exit, he muttered under his breath, "You think this is over?" Karina didn't flinch. She didn't answer. Because in her mind, it had just begun. Karina was halfway through her morning coffee when her phone rang. It was Patricia, and her tone was clipped, urgent. "Karina, we've got a problem," she said without preamble. "Wesley and Lena just filed a formal complaint. They're accusing you of financial fraud." For a moment, Karina couldn't breathe. "On what grounds?" she asked, her voice low and tight. "They've submitted falsified documents," Patricia continued, "claiming you altered financial records, misreported income, and transferred funds using inactive accounts." A sick weight settled in Karina's chest. If these claims stuck, she wouldn't just be fighting Wesley in divorce court, she'd be facing criminal charges. "Are the documents real?" she managed to ask. "No," Patricia snapped, "but they're convincing. Too convincing. Someone doctored them with precision." Karina's mind jumped to the name she hadn't spoken aloud in days. Lena Groves. The silent hand pulling Wesley's strings. But before the panic could fully set in, Patricia added, "I already had B take a look. She found something." Karina straightened, a flicker of hope rising. "What?" Patricia's voice held the sharp edge of satisfaction. "The transaction timestamps are fakes. They reference accounts that didn't even exist when the transfers supposedly happened." The air rushed back into Karina's lungs. That was the crack, the mistake, the one detail Wesley and Lena had overlooked in their haste to ruin her. "That's it," Karina said, her voice steadier now. "We don't just defend, we go on the offensive." Patricia paused, then smiled. "Good, because we're ready." The final attack had come, and it had failed before it even landed. Wesley had gone too far, and now he had left a trail. Karina wasn't just going to clear her name. She was going to bury the ones who tried to destroy it. Karina walked into Patricia's office with the quiet focus of someone who had made a decision and wasn't turning back. "I'm done playing defense," she said, placing her hands flat on the desk. "I want to take them down. Both of them." Patricia didn't blink. Instead, she slid a folder across the desk, already prepared. "We filed a motion this morning, proving the documents were falsified. B's forensic report is airtight. Every timestamp, every transaction, they're all frauds. And now we're countersuing for defamation and the submission of falsified evidence." Karina opened the folder, scanning the paperwork that would not just protect her future, but destroy Wesley and Lena's lies. 2 weeks later, they were back in court. Wesley wore the same smug suit and smirk as before, but Karina could see the cracks. He wouldn't meet her eyes. His lawyer fidgeted. Patricia stood confidently and delivered the blow. "Your Honor, the documents submitted by Mr. Holt and Ms. Groves were fabricated. We have forensic analysis confirming false timestamps, transactions into non-existent accounts, and metadata inconsistencies that prove manipulation." B took the stand next, laying out the fraud with clinical precision. Then came the final nail. Patricia placed another folder on the judge's bench. "In light of this fraud, we are filing a counterclaim for defamation and legal misconduct against both Mr. Holt and Ms. Groves." A hush fell over the courtroom. Wesley's lawyer stood abruptly, requesting to withdraw all claims. "Too late," the judge banged the gavel. "Motion dismissed. All legal costs to be paid by Wesley Holt." As they exited the courthouse, Wesley passed her, his lips thin, eyes dark. Karina didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because for the first time since this began, he was the one walking away with nothing. The settlement came through on a quiet Wednesday morning. Karina sat across from Patricia one last time as the final stack of documents slid across the desk. "It's done," Patricia said simply. He signed. Karina scanned the pages, though she already knew the outcome. Wesley would walk away with nothing. No spousal support, no access to her business, no stake in her properties. His fraud had cost him everything. She slipped the papers into her bag, feeling lighter than she had in months. Patricia smiled. You finally won. But Karina shook her head gently. No, I finally got free. That evening, she joined her mother and Bea at a cozy wine bar tucked beneath a jasmine-covered patio in downtown Savannah. They toasted with laughter and champagne. To freedom, Bea grinned, and to never letting anyone mistake your kindness for weakness again. Karina laughed, a real, unguarded sound. The storm was behind her now. No more courtrooms, no more threats. Just peace. The kind she had nearly forgotten how to feel. Later, she stood alone on her balcony, the Savannah skyline glowing in the distance, warm wind brushing against her skin. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She didn't hesitate. Blocked. Karina turned back inside, opened her laptop and stared at the blank document, waiting for her next idea. Her business, her vision, her life, finally hers again. She whispered into the still night, not with bitterness, but with quiet certainty. This is my story now. And this time, she was the one writing it. The lesson in Karina's story is clear. Strength isn't always loud, it's strategic, patient, and rooted in self-respect. When betrayal threatened to steal everything she built, Karina didn't collapse, she prepared. She protected her assets, her reputation, and most importantly, her dignity. Her journey shows that foresight is power, and silence can be a weapon when used wisely. Trust may be broken, but identity doesn't have to be. In a world where manipulation hides behind charm, Karina proved that being underestimated is a dangerous game for them. Because the smartest move you can make is not letting them see yours coming.